Hey everyone, so in this video I'll be teaching you guys how to write chemical formulas for covalent compounds. So if you can say the name, you'll be able to write the formula. That's the end goal. But firstly, we need to talk about what covalent compounds are. So covalent compounds are compounds which are made up of two nonmetals that share electrons. And so the names of these compounds always include, not always, but oftentimes include prefixes that will tell you exactly how many atoms of each element are in the molecule. Now, before we can begin naming, we need to go over some rules. So the three rules for naming them are, firstly, we need to identify the elements which are in the name. Then, we need to use the prefixes to determine the number of atoms. And lastly, we need to write the correct element symbols with subscripts. So you'll find that naming covalent compounds are oftentimes quite a bit easier than naming ionic compounds. And then to the right here, we see all the prefixes from 1 to 10. So from 1 to 10, they're mono, di, tri, tetra, penta, hexa, hepta, octa, nona, and deca. Now, some of your teachers will give you this and some won't, so depending on what your teacher tells you, you may or may not have to memorize those prefixes. Now, let's do some examples together. So first, we have carbon dioxide. Now here, we can see that there's no prefix for the carbon, so we can just assume there's one. So we can write the elemental symbol for carbon, and then dioxide, which means we have two oxygens. So this, carbon dioxide, the chemical formula will be CO2. Let's try the next example, dinitrogen trioxide. So here, the di in front of the nitrogen shows us that we have, or tells us that we have two nitrogens. So it's going to be N2. And then the trioxide is going to tell us that we have three oxygens, N2O3. So the chemical formula for dinitrogen trioxide is N2O3. And the last example we're going to do together is going to be sulfur hexafluoride. So here we can see that there's no prefix for sulfur, which means we can assume there's only one. And hexafluoride tells us that there's going to be 6 fluorines. So SF6. So the chemical formula for sulfur hexafluoride is SF6. Now pause the video and try the next two examples on your own. But when you come back, you'll see that the chemical formula for nitrogen monoxide is simply NO. There's no prefix for the nitrogen, and there's a mono in front of the oxygen. So nitrogen monoxide is simply NO. And then for carbon tetrachloride, the chemical formula is going to be CCl4. And that's because there's no prefix for the carbon, and then there's a tetra in front of the chlorine. So there's 4 chlorines. Now, as a quick recap, in order to write the formulas for covalent compounds, we need to first use prefixes to know how many atoms. Then we need to write symbols with subscripts. There's no need to balance the charges like in ionic compounds, making the chemical formulas for covalent compounds much easier. And we need to watch out for mono. It's usually dropped from the first element. So if it's not on the first element, we can just assume 1. That's it. Thank you.